Hey there, Fellowship family. Welcome to your one-stop shop for all things church life. I'm Mark Francis, once again in the host seat for today. We're only days away from Christmas. Can you believe that? And, one of the things that in our church life that kicks off the Christmas season is Follow the Star. And we want to use this episode today to really help encourage you, the body of Fellowship Bible Church, of what God does through that event. And I have a couple of people here to help me with telling stories and encourage you guys from that standpoint. First of all, I will look to my right, your audience watching left. Bryan Lewis, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Welcome to, you have not been in the podcast studio before? I can't remember. Have you been
Chris
a part of
and
this?
I were early on
Yes.
talking about moving here and engaging.
I do remember that, and you have some more engaging stories today. I'm
Yeah.
excited about that. Yeah, so Bryan Lewis, thanks for being here, and we also have Angie LeMay. This, once again, is not your first time being in the podcast studio either, right?
It is not.
Welcome
It is not.
back.
Thank you.
And so you are the wife of one of our newer elders, Tim
Yes.
LeMay.
Yes.
And you also are very invested and in the weeds of preparing for Follow the Star, right?
Absolutely.
How long have you been serving for Follow the Star?
15 years.
15 years. So you were there from day one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So give us, in your story, in your eyes, just a quick little recap in a nutshell of like what has gone on over those 15 years of you volunteering with Follow the Star.
Okay. Actually, the very first year, we had not planned to volunteer. We were on our way to see it, and our daughter, Ashley, was in one of the scenes, and a scene fell and pinned her to the ground.
Oh, no.
And so she called Dad, and Dad was there and held the scene up all night. So that is how actually we got involved with Follow the Star.
I was like, insert
Held it up.
Held
insert
it-
Jericho joke
Yes,
now.
absolutely. And then the very next year, we got involved with the hospitality tent, and every year it just, we got more and more involved, and eventually Scott and Karen asked us to join the leadership team, and it's been a blessing to us every year. Every year we start planning in June, and it takes a good 6 months to plan it, but
Talk to me about that. You mentioned a couple things that I'll just follow up on. You said Scott and Karen. That's Scott and Karen Santmeyer.
yes.
And Karen was really kind of the person who helped spearhead and initiate the idea of Follow the Star for being just a children's event. And
Yes,
it just
initially it was.
ultimately snowballed into what it is today.
Absolutely.
Scott, being the pastor of local outreach, is really kind of behind the scenes driving this force so the event can be outreach focused.
Yes.
But you said a leadership team.
Yes.
So what does that look like, and what goes on behind the scenes leading up to Follow the Star?
Okay, there are 4 couples now. We have Scott and Karen, Tim and I, Jim and Pauletta Falabelle, and Nicole and Nathan Wallenfels. They're new to the team. We usually do a follow-up meeting in January to debrief. We ask all of the volunteers, each category has a leader over it, and so they are very instrumental in helping us debrief and what can we do better next year, what worked, what didn't work. We love to hear stories. We talk about the stories then in January. And then after January, we kind of table it and then start again in June.
Cycle it all back around.
Yes, and June is when we start meeting monthly and to implement the new things that we're going to do. And
It's amazing. It's amazing to think that, you're done here in December. You're going to recap in January, but then it comes right back around pretty quick.
Yes.
And being here on campus is a little slightly different. People have stories about that experience as well. But what has that done for the team? Because I think it's important to share just a little bit of that background to our church of, okay, we went from the battlefield, which was a great tradition and experience, and now we're at the church. So give us some of the benefits of what that brings to us as volunteers and as hosting it.
Yes. So typically most of our volunteers would prefer to go back to the battlefield because it's so fun there. But logistically, it's much easier to do it here at church. And we had to start doing it during COVID, the first year of COVID. And the thing that we realized was that we are now able to reach a whole new group of people that we could not reach at the battlefield. Elderly people or people that need assistance that we were not able to reach all of those years. So that, to me, that is the biggest impact on having it here at the church, is so many more people are able to come.
It's helpful to hear that, to know,
Yes.
okay, there's a heart behind it, not just, oh, it's just easier or it's, better for us.
Right.
It really has an outreach component. And I can appreciate that because, walking in the dark through hills and bumps and
Yes.
clumps of grass
It's dangerous.
is not ideal for many people.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have several of the assisted living homes in the area bring a van or a bus and bring their residents, which is amazing.
That's
to
great.
be able to reach them.
Yeah. And Bryan, you've been at the church now for, I want
over
to say
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And so walk us through your family's experience of Follow the Star.
Yeah, it's funny. This didn't hit me until just now, but we were talking before this, and it falls usually on the weekend that I would have military duty. And so for the first 3 years here, I was commanding a unit, so I never could miss, and so I was missing it. Well, our first year here, my mom was able to go, and she died Christmas Day, like a couple of weeks later. And I remember her and just being like the excitement that she had, and just being blown away at how, she loved Jesus. For her, even though it wasn't this accepting of the gospel moment, it was that preaching to yourself, reaffirming, and her just saying, man, this is clearly pointing to Jesus. And so it's got kind of a special place in my heart that I didn't realize until you just asked that. And I'm like, oh, man. So I've only got to attend it twice out of those 2 years. And so this year I was able to go. And I know for my family, they've gone when I wasn't here as an activity, which actually helps me too, because you don't realize how much you worry about stuff when you can't be there. You're reminded of, well, you always think you're in control, but really God's always in control. And so that's something that they were able to do when I was gone, and then coming back and hearing the kids like, tell me about some piece. So it always created further discussions for them. So I think those are the like second, third order effects that we can look at, like, hey, we're going to have a letter, we talk about it, and I've got a cool story with a friend, but there's rippling effects that happen. And that consistency year after year with my kids, I've been here long enough to start seeing that as they've matured, that even though they know some of that story, there's always a piece because of all the planning that goes into it and how comprehensive it is. There's something that stands out each time, and I think that's a beautiful piece to that.
It's really meant to tell the full story of God.
Absolutely.
And so not just this birth manger scene, but going from creation to the cross, and then, okay, what's in it for me? I think is that having that call is such a great example of presenting the gospel to the community. And after 14 years now, the community recognizes this as a tradition. I mean, it's turning into something in town that people already know about. They might not know who's putting it on. They might not know really where it is as much, but they know the words Follow the Star. Yeah. And so as this is growing and developing over these many years, we're seeing God move in our community through this and giving opportunities for people to, like you said, if it's your mother, have a rehearsing the gospel experience, or for people who don't know the Lord at all, wow, this is an aha moment. So tell us a little something what happened with you this past season at Follow the Star, and you were able to invite a friend.
Yeah, so we'll call him Troy. He's a non-believer. We worked at the Pentagon together for a number of years, and we would have lunch once a week. And he's one of those guys, very postmodern, very like, everything's okay. So he's easy to engage on it, but just because he's being friendly and he's willing to hear about anything. And about 3 months ago, I had to go to the Pentagon for something, and he and I were there, and he opened up to me, and he's not a vulnerable person typically. And he said, look, I'm going to be going through a divorce. He has his son was here for Follow the Star, and he was a week short of 4 years old. So really important, crucial age. And so 3 months ago, he said, I've recognized that maybe I should go to church and find community. Like, I'm realizing the importance of that. And this guy's like, no interest in church. And I couldn't help myself. The first words that came out were like, don't tell me you're going to go to a Unitarian church. And he's like, that's exactly where I'm going to go. And I was like,
wow.
okay, well, I just
Yeah.
said, look, man, if you continue to believe in everything, you really believe in nothing. And so like, and we have that kind of relationship. We're kind of, you know, it's in jest or whatever. And so it opened, we've had little moments. And then about 3 or 4 days before, maybe a week before Follow the Star, he sends me a calendar invite. He'll invite himself to my house. He's very like, he works in AI. And so like I get this calendar invite rather than a phone call. And it's the weekend of Follow the Star.
Not a request, just a calendar invite. Be like, hey, I'm showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how he does it every time. And so I accepted it. That's like my way of saying you can come, because they were going to a car race out at the summit. And he's like, can we just come stay the night with you guys? So it's him and his son. I said, sure. So when he shows up, my plan was, I'm just going to, hey man, we're going to hop in the car. We got something we're going to go do. Like I just didn't even give him a heads up. Right. I've already accepted the invite, so now he's on my agenda, right? That's kind of how I see it. And so he comes in the yard, and my wife, Krista, says, oh, did Bryan tell you about Follow the Star and where we're going? I was like, no, I didn't tell him at all. I didn't want to give him the option, so we're just going. And knowing him and getting to know him, I knew that like for him, he's just going to accept that. He's like, yeah, cool, whatever. And so we came, and man, it was just really cool to see. God is like peeling back pieces of him and kind of opening him up in ways I've not seen him. I've known him for years. And so his son's engaged with my kids, and we're waiting. And we were at, our line, when we got on the line, and we weren't on the asphalt.
Right.
And there was they were totally fine. Like kids were running, playing. We were kind of talking. He was kind of seeing what's going on. We enter that village, we get going, and then the real fun starts. Like I think 2 things stand out. Is he like leans over and he keeps telling me he had watched The Passion of Christ recently, which I've not seen. I know enough to know it's not accurate.
Yeah.
And so he started picking up on the differences. And so I was like, well, okay, let's talk about that time. And then he didn't know what a manger was. He's like, what's a manger? And I was like, it's a food trough. Like it's essentially what animals eat out of. And we have a God who lowers himself so much. Like, could you go any lower? Like, that's how, we were. And so you're just planting those seeds. And then the second thing was, he was like, who are the wise men? I've never even heard of the wise men. Now, Krista would get a kick out of this, and then I'll finally be quiet. But so I have this thing where the wise men were not there at the manger, but we have to kind of set it up, right? So whenever I'm at someone's house, I'm sharing my secrets on the internet now. But whenever we go to a party or even my own house, I move the wise men to be approximately 2 years away. So I'll take someone's manger scene and I'll just put their wise men in another part of the house. I don't say a word to anybody. So Krista always moves them back. But so she got a kick out of him asking me that. But then it was like, we're just able to engage. And then you enter that tent and you guys are playing music and they're getting cookies. And it's just a really cool moment to just feel safe. Like they don't even know. So he didn't accept Christ in the moment or any of those kind of things. But these conversations were happening and the interest is there. So now it's like, he's starting to hear the pieces of the gospel that are exclusive to the gospel. And so I was able to bridge to that later and just say, hey man, there is no other religion like Christianity, right? They all have you do something or you're going to get to some point, and this is simply, he's the way, believe.
He's obviously seeking. There's something going on.
He's being stirred
there.
Yep.
You said he had watched a movie with like The Last Temptation of Christ.
That's
or
what it
something
is.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that you're right. It's not fully accurate. So what caused him to even want to watch that? If he's in this kind of mode of not seeking.
Yeah.
But I love how just walking through, you're able to walk with him. I think there's a key component there of having a relationship as you're going through and having questions like that. Have you had any follow-up conversations with him since at all?
Well, so you reminded me, one of my favorite things in the Bible is there's verses that specifically in Peter, he talks about figurative and literal language. And we talk about walking alongside people. It was figuratively and literally happening at Follow the Star.
Yeah.
Like we're just, and it's like, I didn't really have to do much work. I just had to get him there and be ready to answer his questions.
Right.
And your work and others' work and their volunteering was doing that. So he's already invited me for I would say there's more engagement happening now that's like relational, whereas before he kind of reached out professionally. We're in some of the same spaces in our civilian lives. And so it's earlier to tell. I don't have any great story on that other than like as soon as he got home, I got another invite inviting me to go on a camping trip with him up in Matthew's Arm and his son. And so I think I think that's like his way of showing this
Yeah.
engagement means something a little bit more. So
That's cool.
I'm really hopeful in that. So
We use the word, or the phrase planting seeds all the time.
Yeah.
And it goes to the parable of Jesus and the sower and how some seeds go in rocky soil and some are on fertile soil. You just never know what the true soil is of where somebody's at.
Yep.
And so our job is just continually to be presenting Christ to other people around us. Well, one of my stories I'll jump into and share because I was, as always, in the cookie tent doing music.
Yes.
And I enjoy that, and it's fun. There have been some seasons where I haven't, and then I'm serving in other places. But for the most part, for 14, 15 years, I'm serving. And so I'm not able to walk through and have that experience like you, Bryan, to invite somebody and then walk through with them. Every now and then I'll try to jump out and find somebody and say hi, but it's not that same level. So I was able to invite a whole handful of people. And yes, I work here at church, but I also have another world of real estate where I have jobs and employees and clients and stuff like that. And I was inviting anybody. It didn't matter. One family is going to be buying a house right down the road from church. And I said, hey, you know what's going on at that church this weekend? And they're Catholic, and so they have this kind of religious bent. They're like, we'll show up, sure. Sure enough, there they were, saying hi to them, and I've had conversations with them afterwards about what our church provides and what we do and what grace is, and if they're moving right down the road, who knows? Again, it's not about what church you attend; it's about the relationship with Christ. But that's just a simple seed. Another is one of my real estate agents who works. I invited the whole office. Everybody just show up and come. And one of them, unfortunately, was not able to make it. Another one did show up with her mother, and she is probably not really practicing any kind of religion right now, but has a Catholic background, a Catholic bent. And she said that her mother is always looking to get back to church, and she has never found the time to just make it a priority. And her mother lives with her, and she's got kids and a husband. So I had no idea if they were going to come. And sure enough, there they were, went right on by and said hi to them, got them, and just was able to have a quick conversation, said, come to church. So then they came to church as well the very next day. And just the experience of that Catholic experience of what they would be used to of church versus what our church was like. And, whatever Tim was preaching on that day for Christmas was amazing, of course. And she's since come back to church another time. I've had conversations with her in the workplace for that. And she's saying, my mother wants to come back. She brought her husband a second time, who the first time he didn't want to come. Now he's coming. The kids came to church this past week, and the kids didn't want to leave because they were having so much fun. Yeah. One of them was crying that they had to deal with. But just the experience of just bringing somebody into the building. And so having Follow the Star here on campus, another benefit of that is people are exposed to where we are, what the environment looks like, and there's safety in that as well.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about it, that like it does, because some people feel like if they walk through a church doors, they're going to catch on fire.
Literally.
But then they come here and like, okay, hot chocolate, cookies, kind of walk the grounds. These people aren't crazy. I didn't see them burning any cats. Maybe I can wait. They're kind of normal and fun, and they were dressed all different ways, and they're all different ages. And so it makes it probably a little bit easier to step through the threshold. And so that's probably another really great advantage. Yeah.
And for us, doing Follow the Star that first week of December allows for that opportunity for those seeds to grow.
Oh, yeah,
and the idea of Christmas, just with this agent of mine, she's like, well, yeah, we just naturally have to go to church on Christmas Eve. I'm like, well, yeah, sure.
Yes, you do.
Come on back, let's go. And then we'll have conversations with it. But again, it's not just having somebody sit in a seat on a Sunday morning. It's about the ongoing relationship and dialogue that at least I'm now able to have with her and her family.
Right.
We've had other stories that have been submitted. So Angie, I know you've got one that was a letter that someone wrote to our church.
Yes.
And this is a great story as well. So again, as we're having these conversations, it's just encouraging to all of you out there. So read away.
This is actually a handwritten letter.
Handwritten?
That came in a card.
Yeah.
I know. So it's very special. But It says, to every person who helped and participated in any way in Follow the Star, thank you so much for all the time, practice, and love you put into that glorious production. I can't say how impressed we were, far beyond our expectations. It was not only inspiring, but so well planned. When we first arrived and saw the long line, we planned to leave, but when we asked the parking attendant how to get out, he encouraged us to stay, saying that the line moved very quickly, which it did. But how could it be worth an apparently long wait with 4 children under age 6 at almost their bedtime? Well, it was way more than worth it, because first of all, it was not a long wait. It really did keep moving. Then the kids really enjoyed the marketplace, petting the donkey, making bracelets, writing in Arabic. Each of the people working there, including the children, were helpful, knowledgeable, and polite and kind. Then the tour guides were excellent, and we learned a lot. The actors and costumes were really believable. Most impressive were the huge angels with the shepherds. After all of the scenes, a man told us that the cross was the reason for the whole nativity. But the other things he said about how we each have something in us that makes us do things we wish we didn't, in similar words, is what affected me the most. I'm so thankful to Jesus for going through all that for me, because I'm sinful. Then the tent with the live Christmas music, cookies, and hot chocolate was icing on the cake. The singers and the musicians were wonderful. We appreciate music, and it was all well done. Also, whoever baked cookies, they were delicious, and we were pleasantly surprised that the cocoa was not too hot for the children. Then there was no mention of donations, so I'm sending this to show my support and appreciation for such a pleasant and wonder-filled evening. Our family and our son's family all really enjoyed it. We were so impressed. God continue to bless each of you involved, and you're all wished a beautiful, meaningful Christmas and a bright and happy new year ahead.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was their first time to attend, so
That's
yes.
cool. And so for someone to take the effort to handwrite a letter and to go down all of those different kind of level of details of what they experienced, all for the point of recognizing, yeah, I'm a sinner.
Right.
The point of the cross, and he did that for me. It's kind of cool.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. It's the reason we do it.
That's exactly it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the heart of this conversation is, yeah, year after year, for those of us that have served for 14, 15 years in a row, it can kind of get a little bit drag, and you can be exhausted, and you're getting back to thinking and being on a planning team again in July for Follow the Star. Well,
Right.
why do we do it? Well, we
Right.
do it for those seeds to be planted for people to come to know Christ.
If I'm being honest, like I struggle with, you asked me, Angie, when we first came in, if we volunteered this time, because you didn't know why Mark invited me.
Yeah.
He went down a long list and no one else was available. But I felt a little sense, and it's happened before. You weren't sending this my way, but I had this sense of guilt, like, yeah, I should be doing those things, right? But then as you were reading that, I was thinking about all the little things and how God works in our lives. Like He knows, down to the hairs on our head, but He also the grandness of Him, and then how personal He is. It's like all those little pieces, whether it was somebody just restacking cookies, right, or the
Cleaning the
person
porta
standing
potties.
Absolutely.
and we talk
Yes.
about those
You name
things
it.
because it sounds right, but it is so true in this case because. Like they notice little details. Oh, no donation box. There's no
Right.
donation box because our people are donating their time and effort.
Right.
And then I realized, wait a minute. The other message to hear is my job was to actually be there and invite someone
Absolutely.
and just be present. And and God works through that too. And so I think that's another message to not forget is like whatever it is, whether it's prayer, just don't ignore it and
Absolutely.
be comfortable with wherever God has you because He's that sovereign.
Yeah, our whole church played a role.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
In that participation. I think we had numbers of maybe almost 400 people were volunteering and serving from some capacity. But the whole church, as you're saying, whether you're participating by just walking through, whether you're praying for it, making cookies,
yes.
the numbers just go down. The untold stories we'll only know in heaven of what the impact continually will be year after year from this, and that's again the purpose of this conversation is just to encourage you who's watching and listening to say, yeah, this is making a major impact. I want to end up with just this conversation, just a quick statement from you guys. what do we do next? You know, like how do we take this idea of, oh, it is this easy, or I can invite somebody to church, or I can walk with somebody and answer a question or two. Like, how do we take that into our everyday lives to say, don't just wait for next follow the star for this to happen? What does that look like for all of us? That's not really a question. That's just a statement. But you know, what would you suggest to somebody who's sitting here questioning, scratching their head, saying, "What could I do? What can I do out there in the real world?"
I think one is just resting in God's sovereignty again, and knowing that go make disciples might mean, I mean, oftentimes it just means going where He's already got you, and just being willing to have the, like, ask that next level of question down. Or one of the things that I try to do at work especially is use redemptive language. Talking some of the way, you know, I'll talk to someone if they make a mistake, and you know, I have a pretty large team, and I'm like, I'm not looking for fault. I said, you know, in life, like, to me, the best story is the last written story. So let's write a better story from here. Like, what did we learn? And they start to notice that, and that didn't seem like much, but over time I've seen where when people have something a little deeper happen, they'll come to me because they sense something different, right? And it's not me. It's God's glory and His work. But I think sometimes we just overcomplicate, and it's like anything else. Like engaging in a sport or neighbor, you just get, I mean, whether it's a tiny step or a giant leap, just stepping into those spaces, and when you feel that little stirring, and it's like, I'll ask a question, or, hey, I'm going to pray for that. You know, I had someone at work yesterday, and I said, I always try to put a little bit of honesty to it, and I'll say, you know, I'm going to do my best over the next week to pray specifically. I said, I'm a praying man. I have a worldview that is a Christian worldview. And so I want you to know that I'm praying for that. And so instead of just saying I'm going to pray for it, because that's kind of this general thing, I'll specifically use it as a chance to just drop a little nugget there to say, hey, my worldview, I believe that prayer works, and I'm going to do my best over the next week to pray specifically on that, and I'm going to follow up with you and just check in on you.
But even that is having just an intentionality with your language, with what you're saying, with a heart to say, okay, what can I say that will just slightly make an impact in their world? It shows them God exists, and that He cares for them, and that you care for them as well. Yeah. So it's that intentionality,
and not being afraid when we aren't good Christians. So when I've had a couple of, and even with my kids, like, I really cherish the opportunity to apologize in front of them and to them, and to their mother. Like, I recently got short with Krista, and I said, everyone come back in here. Like, your mom, this is why she doesn't deserve that. This is why it's sin. I want you to see, I'm telling her sorry. And I've tried to do something similar at work. I can't go that deep, you know, up front. They just start putting me in the weird box. But it's corner. Like being vulnerable and recognizing that my identity isn't in my job title. And so I think, just continue to lean into what the fruits of the Spirit look like. And when we don't have the good ones, then also just owning that. And people will start to get a sense of something different. And then that's when you can just, and being patient. Like, there's so many stories where, we just talked about Simeon not that long ago, right? Like, he, as far as we know, he had like one role, and it was right there. And that doesn't seem, we can see in the latter times that's really great. But leading up to that point, like, there's so many stories where it's like, that's their only point, but like, that's a huge message, and it's continuing to be told. And I think sometimes we should just trust God and take that tiniest step forward.
Yeah. And I know, Angie, you have a heart for hospitality and hosting, and you've talked to us before about Light of the Night, of what that looks like. What do you and Tim kind of generally do on a regular basis to kind of have those antennas up for other people around you?
Well, at work, he's a lot like you, Bryan, and it's very intentional with the guys that he works with and being there for them. He's one of the older guys at work, and so he's been able to mentor several of them, and knowing that he's a believer, and a lot of times that just starts with praying at lunchtime and just praying for a meal. He's prayed the gospel in his lunch, prayer. So they all know, but just when they have crisis, then they know who to go to. So he's able to share the gospel that way, and I agree with something that you said, just being faithful where we are. So if you're a young mom at home, which, I did that. I stayed home with my kids. You can be a witness and be faithful in your neighborhood and having those kids in your home, the neighbor kids in your home. And we've been married long enough that we've had adult kids come back to us and tell us what that meant to them, to be those people in the neighborhood that were there no matter what they needed. And then Light Up the Night, we absolutely love Light Up the Night. So every year it gets bigger and bigger, and more and more people. We actually need more volunteers. So next
But
year,
it doesn't even have to be that. So
No,
doing
it
the Easter
doesn't.
egg hunt for Easter, use the different kind of culturally normative kind of settings to infuse Christ into something.
Yes.
And so Halloween with Light Up the
Wherever
Night,
you are, and
Easter
you're-
with Easter egg, Follow the Star, Christmas, whatever it is. Like there's opportunities, whether it be a kids' school play or a
Absolutely.
soccer game or wherever that you can just build relationships.
Yeah, I
with
think
people
of
around
a donut. Like most people, if they're smart, like a good donut, right? So it's like, what are the donuts in our lives where it's like, we think about it in our house. We happen to live on the parade route. We had a good realtor that got my wife what she wanted.
Sure.
But like we see that as an opportunity that God has given us because it puts all these people in our yard and we intentionally have. And it's a place where everyone wants to have fun. And yes, you can. It's easy to point and be like, well, there's a lot of debauchery over here or there, but mostly it's a family event. So it's like, what are those things you're interested in that draw different people together? And then just if you're uncomfortable, drag along a few of your Christian friends, the wiser ones, the not so wiser ones, and enter those spaces and just start building relationships where you already are, like that.
Yeah.
My donut analogy was probably totally lost, but
That's okay. We get it.
got it.
Everybody likes a donut.
I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I have donuts on the mind always. So if it's not donuts, it's ice cream. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, that's good conversation for another time, another day.
Yeah.
But apple blossom. There's another example.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
but you can go down the list of the opportunities that exist, and how can we build bridges, as we've learned as a church over this past year. How can we build bridges into the community? And Follow the Star is an amazing one. And so it's encouraging to hear these small little stories, the ones that have been written in, the ones that we're experiencing or have heard third hand. It's just fun to
Absolutely.
know that we're part of what God is doing
Yeah.
around us.
And you don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Like
No,
if
we
we
don't.
did, we wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
engage people on it, right?
We're just being used
Right. We
by
don't
God.
have them.
And,
You don't need answers to put your arm around someone.
Absolutely.
Right? So
and we got His Spirit to lead us and guide us. So,
Yeah.
well, Angie, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Bryan, thank you so much. All of you guys watching and listening, thank you for your participation in Follow the Star. And we still want to hear from you. So if there's additional stories that you think would be encouraging to our body, feel free to write them in, call them in, let us know, and we can just encourage one another from that standpoint. So the fact of the matter is, just keep watching for that. Listen to God's Spirit lead you and guide you, and keep us posted, because that's what it is. So until actually, I don't even have another episode to promote. I was going to talk about which next one is going to be. So just be on the lookout. Come New Year. Have a Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas. Yeah.
And Happy New Year. And until we do chat again, continue to let Christ be the focus of your life each and every day.